اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. This is the final session of the seven episode series pointing out the obvious. And I hope that up till now the topics that I chose or the content was reasonable. There will be a QR code right at the end if you take a moment and scan it and then provide any form of feedback that you are willing to. It's a survey. It's a very, very short survey. It's just there's just space for a suggestion, comment, question, any form of feedback that you would like to provide. We do read them, so it's not like we take it and flush it. We actually read it and we try and I use some of these comments and questions to guide future topics and future series, and I try to answer the questions that are asked in other settings. I sometimes try and do a Q&A session at the end of these 7 episode series, but I'm honestly way too tired to do that, and I'm just going to be kind of answering questions, swatting questions right, and I won't be focused. So I'll just add it to the survey, and then if I feel there's a lot of questions that require answering, then I'll schedule another time for it, and where we're all nice and nourished and your teas and coffees are at your side and you feel better. The final topic that I want to talk about today is cross-gender relationships. I felt like I left the best for last, really. I felt this is a topic that requires, it's unfortunate there's only 15 people in the masjid. This is something that I talked about over the course of a number of khutbahs in the past, and I've explained in different settings as well. And I still feel that a lot of the people who attend these khutbahs or these sessions don't really walk away with full understanding or clarity on the topic. And we still struggle within our community sometimes with what exactly the parameters are. And there is certain things regarding this topic that are absolutely obvious. Islam did not come and change them for the Arab. Meaning there were certain behaviors that the people in that era they lived by, and it didn't really matter whether they were Muslim or not. They knew what was right and what was wrong, and it just came naturally to them. And I think we've kind of lost a little bit of that, and it's not, I think, necessarily from our own doing, but the world has changed. If you were to take footage from 1925 and compare it to 2025, it's almost unrecognizable in terms of how people carry themselves, how they dress, how they speak to one another, what is considered acceptable, what is not considered acceptable. A lot has changed, and a lot does change when it comes to this topic, specifically in non-religious communities. For Muslims, this is something that is pretty clear, and it doesn't require a lot of coaching, and there's a lot of aspects of the nature of these relationships that are a part of the obvious compartment within Islam. So today I'm going to try and kind of summarize some of these some of the basic rules and some of the guiding principles that Islam shares with us regarding these types of relationships, and hopefully at the end of it it's clear to you, because this is a part of what is obvious within our deen. None of what I'm sharing today was going to be something that scholars actually differ upon. At least not outrageously or not controversially to the point where we have two sects of Islam going after each other, but rather maybe some preferences that scholars have regarding certain aspects of practice and behavior. So are you gonna save me or just, yeah? What a learning curve we have here. I've been doing this for 3 years. Well, for 3 years I've been going like this and not working and still. And I mean, you would sue after. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. All right. So it's a longer statement this time. I want to cover a number of topics here. So obviously men and women will have relationships. That's not something that needs to be pointed out. Full segregation is not a requirement, expectation, or goal of Islamic law. Islam is not aiming towards full segregation where women and men do not interact at all. That's not the Islamic goal. It never was. It's not now, and it's not going to be in the future. And those who think that way, honestly, I just don't. I know where it comes from. It comes from Bedouin law. There's a difference between Islamic law and Bedouin law. Like, there's a big difference between the two. Bedouin law in Arabia and today is very different, and it's very strict, and it's very segregated, and it has been for a long time. Actually, Islam came and fixed a lot of that. Islam came and pointed out a lot of what was going on that should not be going on. But then at some point, I don't know exactly when, we regressed back to that. I think there was a loss of integrity of these relationships that caused scholars to repel against that loss of integrity. But instead of repelling back and then going back to what Islam actually taught, they went a step back further and they went back to Bedouin law. And that became, within the books of fiqh, at least maybe in the last 400 years, it became the norm. It became what was preached and taught and expected of people, even though it has nothing to do with how Muslims function. And if you just read a little bit within the hadith of the Prophet, so you open a book of sunnah that is authentic, you start reading, you're like, oh, these two people talked. Oh, these people used to. Oh, this is obvious that they hung out. Here they seem to have much more openness in terms of, oh, this person is having dinner at this other person's house, and the wife is sitting. Like, you find all of these. You'll pick up on these. Habitual behaviors that the Arab had, that the Sahaba had, that is not really in keeping with the amount of segregation. And it's also not just Bedouin law; it's also Victorian law. So Victorian law, which comes from a certain era within Great Britain, and they claimed to be rooted in Catholicism. It's not. It's just it was an aristocrat way of living life that has nothing to do with religion. That for some reason we picked up on, and we felt that was the standard that we have to adhere to, and we started to adhere to it when it came to marriage, or it came to And when you study the reality of the life of the Sahaba with the Prophet ﷺ, you'll find it was very different. And I'm going to point out some of these differences, as we go along. So full segregation is not a requirement, expectation, or goal of Islamic law. Rather, proper etiquette, good manners, mutual respect, and a regulated environment is what Islam aims to achieve for people. This is what Islam is hoping to achieve for us. This allows for healthy and well-defined relationships to flourish, while prohibiting unhealthy and flirtatious relationships. Marriage is heavily encouraged in Islam, as the pursuit of intimacy is a human right. To want to find intimacy in your life, that's a right. You're obligated, and you're well within your rights to pursue intimacy. It's a beautiful thing, and it's important. And we really don't find fulfillment as human beings without it. And if you don't get it, actually, it becomes the only pursuit you have in life, or you end up turning off a part of who you are, and it kind of affects your character and your personality quite heavily. And both are not healthy. Obviously, if proper regulations, clear messaging, and viable options for appropriate intimate relationships are not provided, people will seek these relationships unlawfully, and fawahish or fahisha will occur. And this is just a reality. If we don't provide the proper environment, the proper setting, the proper regulations, we don't allow for a viable option for people to seek intimate relationships, then they will seek it elsewhere. And they will seek it unlawfully. And they will fall into fahisha, and it will occur. And then we can't really blame. Well, everyone's blameworthy for their choices, but as a community, we can't really, as people who are interested in how communities function, we can't really blame younger people. Well, we didn't really provide them with an alternative here, so why are we so upset? So when we're yelling at, you can't really yell. We didn't really help you. We made this hard. When haram is hard, then halal. When haram is easy, halal should be easier. If shaitan is making things easy and you're making things difficult, where do you think people are going to go? People will always, water will always run in the lowest point. It's just the nature of how we are. So if you want to avoid people falling into unlawful relationships, falling into fahisha, then we have to make sure that we provide options that are reasonable, that people can access, that it doesn't make it too difficult for people to do that. So this is probably the most important piece. So what are the types of cross-gender relationships? And this is awfully catered to a modern setting. Maybe when you read the books of ethics or fiqh in Islam, you may not find all of these options there, because not all of these options probably existed in the same way that they do today, or as clearly or as relevantly as they do today. So the first type of gender, and this is between men and women. The first one is emergent or medical. This is a really specific type of relationship, and it's also it can be quite difficult to understand or accept. Meaning, what you're allowed to do in a medical setting or an emergency setting is obviously not allowed elsewhere. If someone is a car accident and the car is on fire, you're not going to go in there. Oh, she's not wearing hijab, so you walk away and let the car explode and kill the lady. You're not going to say, well, I'm not mahram, so I can't touch her. So you let her alert. You're going to go in there and going to do everything that you can to save this person. You're going to pull them out. If she's not breathing, then you're going to perform CPR on her, and you're going to make sure, like, you're going to do things that you would, that doing it to someone who is well and alive and focused, it would be absolutely haram and would be a huge problem, and you would probably go to jail if you were caught doing it. This would be like, it'd be very problematic. But because it's an emergency and because it's medical, like I treat within clinic, I don't actually treat a lot of breast cancer at all. But sometimes we see patients. Sometimes one of my colleagues is sick or away, so I have to cover his clinic for him. So this is where what's happening in this room would not be allowed. If you remove the medical setting, it would be very, very awkward. Why am I sitting there with this lady's top down, and why am I, like, it doesn't make any sense. Well, because I'm a physician and she's ill, and this is what we're, so there's a specific regulation for this relationship that allows it to be not only permissible, but it's also obligatory to a certain degree. You're obligated to save people's lives. You're obligated to do whatever is required to save them, and you're not supposed to, you're not asked to adhere to some of the rules that we're going to be talking about today in terms of your relationship with them. So it's a very specific type of relationship. You're not going to run into it very often, but when you do, just make sure that you understand that there's really the boundaries are removed here at this point, because it's darura. It's the heaviest of darura, saving a life or taking care of people medically. Even with that, as physicians, we are held to a certain ethical standard when we're dealing with patients, right? Like a very strict ethical standards when we're dealing with patients, and the smallest mistake will get a physician fired and his license removed, which is why, for example, when I enter a room, there's always a chaperone. There's always any lady under 60, there's going to be a chaperone in the room with me, just for her safety and for mine, because you never know how people interpret what's being said, even over 60 sometimes, but. It really, some of them like grandmothers to you, so they don't really. But the idea here is that there's certain parameters here that are allowed, because I am functioning with my physician hat on my head. So it's not, I'm not some guy from the street, and I'm not a friend, and I'm not a spiritual leader. This is a doctor, so I have to sit there and I have to make sure that I follow those rules. But at the same time, what's allowed in this relationship is different. You're told thing, you spend a fair amount of time talking to this person. Sometimes it's in confinement, like there's no one there. So a lot of what would apply outside does not apply here specifically, because this is an emergency situation, or it's some medical care or health care. And that's important for you to understand, but it doesn't mean that it's open, you can do whatever. No, you're actually held to a very high ethical standard. That's number 2, maharim. So not Kleenex, but maharim as in people who you can't marry. Your father, your mother, your sister, your sibling, your aunts, your grandmothers, your grandchildren, people who is haram for you to marry. People who you have no real reason to think about that. It's actually a disgusting thought to have to begin with. If it's not a disgusting thought for some reason, then other rules will apply. And you say, well, that's disgusting in its own sense. Well, sometimes that can happen, especially, for example, if 2 siblings were parted at birth and they didn't meet each other until the mid-20s. Well, they're not going to feel about each other as maybe 2 siblings who grew up in the same house fighting all the time, right? There'll be love between them, but it'll be a little bit different. So for them, people, they have to observe certain regulations and parameters in their relationship so that they keep themselves safe from falling into incense or any form of fahisha. But maharim are people who that is not expected to occur due to how people feel about things, and due to the fact that it's just not natural, and there's a lot of openness here in this relationship. Meaning these are the people you can spend like hours upon hours talking to and sitting, and she doesn't have to wear the hijab in front of you, and she can talk to you about her problems. You can tell her about your most intimate secrets and fears. So these are people you can go with to Umrah and Hajj with, and people you can live in the same house with, and people that. So this is because there's a mahram. You get people who you're not allowed to marry, and there's no shahwa towards marrying. Those are the 2 conditions here. Meaning you're not allowed, and there's no tendency for you to desire that. If there's a tendency to desire because of a setup that is different, meaning this family has been, it's not the same setup, then certain regulations have to apply for the safety of the individuals. Which is why, for example, right, the Prophet ﷺ said when boys and girls, when siblings grow up, at a certain age, you have to put them in different beds, in separate beds, so that we don't end up, because where does the majority of sexual abuse and molestation happen? In the home. happens most of the time in the home, like 95% of the time in the home. And if there's a person in the home who is not blood related, is not a mahram, a direct mahram to the people in the house, that risk of molestation and sexual abuse is timed by sevenfold. There's a 7-time higher risk of people being molested in the household whenever there's no mahram relationship. Meaning a man is brought into the house, a lady marries someone and she has her kids there, and he is not related to them. No blood relations. He's not like an uncle, for example. Someone died, and then the brother married the lady. For example, that's much safer. But someone else, the risk of this happening is timed by 7, which is why so many women, so many mothers choose not to marry after their husband passed away. For their children. This was not required, by the way, back in the day. You know why? You know why? You know why? You and I talked about this. Is our funnest thing. This is what you and I do in our. So why was it not a problem 1,000 years ago? Yeah, because men lived in their own houses. Right? They didn't live in with the. So the lady was not actually bringing in a man who was going to be living in the house all day. No. There's a man who came for certain hours during the day. He provided, he brought in provision, he protected, and he was there for a certain time, but then he got out. So the kids were not exposed to the presence of a foreign male in the home all the time, because that's where the risk actually falls. So it's much easier for them to remarry, and they would remarry multiple times, which is why Khadija had 3 children when she married the Prophet ﷺ from 2 husbands. Right, but that wasn't the fear. There was no fear. And of course, alayhi salatu wasalam raised them like his own, and they all grew up, seeing him as their father, alayhi salatu wasalam. But there was a safety. There was safety because there was some degree of segregation back then. But that's so when you talk about, well, I want someone to talk to, I want a shoulder to cry on, I want someone to look for your maharim, talk to your sister, Habibi, talk to your mother, talk to your aunt. They're human beings too, and they'll totally understand you. I know the other lady over there seems more attractive for you to go tell all your problems to, but the maharim, that's where you go and do this. If you actually, you're at a point where you're not on the market for marriage, this is not your time, then you spend time with the maharim, and honestly, that's a better place for you to invest your relationships, in the relationship you have with your mother and with your sisters and with your aunts and your grandmothers and your daughters, and this is where you invest. This is family. The second is maharim, and this is the safest. And this is where there's not many regulations here. You just can't marry them, obviously. Number 3, blood relations, arhamuk. So cousins and second cousins and people who are related to you. In Islam, people who are related to you outside of the groups that I pointed out, the maharim, the people who it's haram for you to marry, you can marry them. So you can marry cousins and second cousins and third cousins. This is a very, very common practice in all over the world, aside from North America. And when they get all, oh my God, that's disgusting, it's just, well, you're the ones who are not on board with what the rest of the world has done, or historically, the biblical prophets like Ishaq alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam, they all married within their families. Charles Darwin married his cousin. Like, this is only the maybe in recent centuries it has become such a taboo in the West. It's really weird. And this is the example when fawahish become norms and halal becomes a taboo. Like, this is what happens. This is what happens in communities when you don't have parameters, when you don't have regulations, when you don't have proper law. Then sleeping with people outside of wedlock is normal, expected. You're questioned if you don't do it. What's wrong with you? But if you marry someone who is halal for you to marry, it's taboo, and you're seen as doing something absolutely disgusting, and you're mocked on every liberal TV network and media outlet that exists in the world. And this is just and subhanAllah, I'm just pointing this out so you understand that this is what happens. It happens in every community when you lose track of what's right and what's wrong. This is what ends up occurring. So blood relations, people who are your arham, you are required to care for them, to visit them, to go and ask about how they are doing, and help them financially, help them socially. They're your arham, and we have large family gatherings. There's a reason for why you would socialize with these people and talk to them, but it's very clear. It's based on the fact that we are related. Your mother is my aunt, or your grandfather was my grandmother's brother or sister or brother or whatever. Like, there's some way of relating. So you have a reason for talking to these people and spending time with them and asking about them and visiting them from time to time. So it's not something out of there's context to it. What you're going to find that I'm going to be doing throughout this lecture is helping you define relationships. A relationship that is well defined is a safe relationship. It's safe, right? A lady who's sitting in a clinic who's willing to show a part of her body that she would never show anyone else. The reason that she'll do that is because it's a very well-defined relationship. There's no question who I'm a physician and she's my patient. It's very clear here that that's safe. It makes me safe and it makes her safe because well-defined. We're not, it's not a rendezvous. We're not out here to have a coffee and chat about our life. We're here to care. I'm here to care for my patient and medically and psychologically, whatever types of support that this person requires. So that's why in emergency situations, it's not a problem because it's well-defined. You are right now the hero. You're the person, you're saving someone's life. So it's a well-defined. The problem is when a relationship is not well-defined. This is where the problem lies. When an ill-defined relationship, we don't know exactly what this is, right? Friends, for example. It's just a word. You have no idea what that means. What does that mean? Explain what that means. Like, define it for me. You can't, which is why people prefer that term. An ill-defined relationship keeps options open. Anything can happen. We like that excitement, by the way. When things are well-defined, it becomes a little bit more boring, but keep it open, just say anything. Blood relations, you know why it is you're spending time with these individuals, because they're related to you by blood. Social acquaintances, like your neighbors, for example, or friends of family friends, people that your parents know, have known for a long time. I have friends and they're married. Their wives are social acquaintances. I know them. So there's a reason for why if I saw them in the street, I would give salams to them and ask them how they're doing, but there's a well-defined relationship. Right? It's based on the fact that they are social acquaintances. So I know the parameters I'm going to stay in. The conversation is going to stay within the parameters of a social acquaintance. Right? I'm going to stay there because I know based on what we have this relationship. Sometimes you have the relationship you have with someone is multifaceted. Like there's more than one. They're blood relations, and they are colleagues, and they are social acquaintances, and they're your neighbors, and there's a bunch of stuff. So it opens up for more options of you kind of discussing things and talking about stuff. But you have to be careful because we're going to talk about a piece that's going to matter in a moment. Social acquaintances. Number 5, professional relationship. Like a colleague or an employment, whether you employ someone, you're employed by someone, or you're working with them, their colleagues. Or it's a professional relationship. And this word is probably the best word that I can think of that would define or describe most cross-gender relationships, is professionalism. If you are professional, then you are fine. You're always going to be safe. Right? And it's not difficult for someone who works in the workspace, in the workplace or in life, to define in their minds or understand what a professional relationship would look like. It doesn't mean that it's emotionless. It doesn't mean that it lacks common decency and kindness. It just means it's very directed. I know why we're sitting here. Like, why are we sitting on the same table talking? Because there's a clear, we're professionals, we have a project we're working on together, so we're going to talk about this project. So you stay within the parameters of the professional relationship that you have with this person, whether they are a colleague or it's an employment one. I added classmates, even though you could easily just put it under professional easily. But I pointed out because the majority of people who struggle with this, and those who give me headaches in my life, are coming from this group. It's classmates. When you have a classmate, someone that you go to school with, or someone that you go to university with, or someone that you study with, there is a very well described relationship there too. And if you adhere to it, then you're fine. And if you adhere to the fact that what we're doing together is doing talab ilm, we're learning together. So learning, as long as we stay within that lane, as long as we talk about things that are related to learning, then you're safe, right? So classmates is another relationship that is very valid between genders, because they will be learning together, and that will require sometimes collaboration on projects or helping with questions and answers and assignments and whatnot. Another one is mentor-mentee, educational. So this is similar to, for example, the physician-patient relationship. It's a little bit different, though. When you are either teaching someone from the opposite gender or learning from them, this relationship is also very well defined, because they are your mentor or they're your teacher, and they are actually they're obligated to spend time with you, to talk to you, to help you work through your problems and your troubles, and answer all of your questions and help you understand things. So this is a very well-defined relationship as well. Now, all of the things that I'm pointing out here have the possibility of going wrong. Even though they're well-defined, they can still go wrong. When we talk about blood relations or social acquaintances or a professional relationship, most of the mistakes that occur in one of these settings. Someone who made a mistake with a colleague of his, or even a mentee. And this is actually a big problem. One of the biggest problems, in my opinion, is allowing for certain relationships I believe are prohibited ethically. or prohibited ethically. So for a physician to get involved in it with the patients, absolutely unacceptable. If it does happen, that the physician will lose his license, or they will lose, even if the person is no longer their patient. Like it used to be where, okay, if they're not your patient later on, you can go ahead. No. Once the relationship is medical, khalas, it's medical forever. Because there's a power differential here. There's a power differential between the physician and the patient, between the teacher and the student, between the mentor and the mentee. This is where like a lot of problems occur within the Muslim community, especially in masajid. Imams fall into this all the time. Someone comes to ask a few questions, she asks 3 or 4 times, they get married. No, this is the moment you get, the moment you come and talk to me with my imama on my head, that's it. This relationship is now, this is what the relationship is going to be like. For the rest of time, this is our relationship. We never will it be anything else. Because there's a power differential here. Because you're going to tell me things about yourself that will make you vulnerable, and I won't, because that's not what we're here to do. I'm not here to tell you about my problems. You had a question, so okay, what's your question? So you have to explain to me something about your life. So you just gave up a piece of information about yourself that you don't give up to everybody. So you gave it up to me so I could answer a question for you. Now there's a power differential. Now you feel more vulnerable in this relationship than I do. Vulnerability is easily confused by human beings with love or with attraction. Like we have a part of our primate brain does not know the difference between feeling vulnerable to someone versus feeling attracted to them. Right? Which is why this power differential has to be observed by the stronger party. So the physician has to be aware of this. The teacher has to be aware of this. The mentor has to be aware of this. The imam has to be aware of this. The leader has to be aware of this because we know that in this position specifically, what the other person in front of us is feeling is not real. It's just based on them feeling vulnerable within a power differential relationship that makes them sometimes misunderstand this relationship, misunderstand that weakness or that feeling of vulnerability, confusing it with attraction. And if I am open for business, I will fall into a problem, mistake. You can say later on, oh, it was marriage. No. See, the whole premise of this relationship was problematic. The whole premise of it, the basis of it was wrong. This person, when she came and knocked on the door, she wasn't looking for a relationship. She didn't come to you hoping to get married. She came to you, had a problem she wanted to be solved. Why did she walk away with a husband? And she walks in with a problem, walks out with a husband with another problem. Why? She walked in with a problem, you solve the problem, and she leaves. That has to be respected that way. When we don't respect it, that's why when you hear about relationships, a teacher marrying a student or something, everyone feels like, ugh. Like even it's just like, no, that shouldn't happen. And yes, I agree with you. It shouldn't happen. It should never happen. And it's always the fault of the person in charge. Always. It's just the reality of it. We are taught this, as we are moved forward within the ranks of learning Islam, and once you come to the point where you're on a minbar and you're sitting on a chair and you're talking, people are listening to you, you are taught this, that you are responsible for this. You are not allowed to take advantage of this at any point. And if you're not married, then you need to go married. That's why most of the time, certain activities for scholars are prohibited until they're married. A lot of the scholars of early Islam who didn't get married did not have like a large masjid where they gave a lot of durus and they counseled people. So if you look in the, like Imam Nawawi and Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah and people like this who did not get married, they wrote a lot of books. That's what they did. They absolutely focused on authoring and research and documentation, because they didn't have large, like when they did, it was actually quite limited because they were not married, and their audiences would be strictly men. They wouldn't even entertain talking to ladies because of the problems that can occur here. Because if he wants to get married, then he has to do this socially. He has to do it through his social, through the social venues and channels, not through the Islamic ones. Because it's not fair. A student is coming to learn Islam, yes, there will always be the possibility of something wrong here if the person is not aware of it. So the mentor-mentee educational, that power differential is important to understand. I want you to make sure you comprehend it, because you may be in a position one day where this occurs. If you are the CEO of a company, there's a power differential between you and an employee. I see that to be as ethically. I don't know if it's on the chart of ethical breaches yet. I don't know if marrying someone that you employed, but I see it to be very similar. Because the person that you employ, there's a power differential. You are the one who does their monthly review or annual review or whatever. So you really control whether they're going to make a living or not. So that vulnerability that this person has, they can confuse it. They can confuse it with attraction when it's not. So I feel like even when it comes to employment, if you are employed, then this should not be the case. It should be treated as a physician, patient, teacher, student, mentor, mentee relationship, imam, spiritual leader, yani congregant. And I really do emphasize the importance of this topic. I've seen too many mistakes happen. I've seen too many sad stories occur because of it. And then the last one is spouses. And this is where you get to express yourself. You get to express your sexuality and express your intimacy within the safe parameters of wedlock, of matrimony, of being, this is your spouse. So all that which we are saying that you should not express elsewhere, this is where you're going to express it, right? So certain things, certain type of just conversations should not happen outside of your maharim or your spouse. And certain behaviors should not happen outside of what you have with your spouse. No one else should be exposed to this, and you should not be exposing yourself to anyone else outside of that. And this is really the whole point of talking about cross-gender relationships. And once we understand them, we are capable of functioning better as a community. Because so what happened, I'll point out some things to you that occurred. So in the Middle East, when you go to masajid, so any of the sisters here grow up in the Middle East for a while? Okay. Would this be possible in a masjid in the Middle East? Okay, where would you be? Yeah, okay, in the basement or on the second floor, right? Where you would never be in the same area as the imam is. And if you walked into that area, like the gasp that people would have would be audible in the next, in the next masjid. Like, because based on what are you walking into a masjid? I don't agree with that. I don't think it's right. I never did. Even living there, I didn't think it was right. But there's a norm there, a cultural norm that doesn't really act. So, for example, there's a Quran program here that runs for the ladies. Sheikh Amiria, she takes care of it. I am required every once in a while to get involved and to assessments and prizes and competitions and curriculum and talk to teachers and whatnot. Every once in a while I have to go do something. If I were to do that in Syria, I would be named as a pervert and kicked out of the masjid. Like if I had any involvement in the Quran program that the ladies ran it, at any level, on any level, if I showed any interest in it, if I showed up at any point and to speak, then it's just a cultural difference. They don't want you there. They don't need you, first of all. They're much more better established. They actually have better programming than the men do. They have more teachers than the guys do. They have better mentorship situations than the shabab do. So they're way better equipped, and they don't need you. Like your existence and your presence is not required. They don't want it. They don't want to sit in masajid that are similar. So this is the Prophet ﷺ's masjid breakdown. The men were up front and the ladies sat behind, and there was no curtains or there was nothing. And men knew, because it was obvious, this is why I'm saying it was obvious, men knew that they wouldn't look back, and they wouldn't mingle, and they wouldn't stand up front and watch the ladies as they left. They knew what to do. It just happened naturally. Right after Salah, the men got up, they got out, or they sat there and let the ladies slowly shuffle out on their own, and once everyone was gone, then they went home. So there were certain things that just happened, obviously. He didn't need to preach or coach the Sahaba to do this, alayhi salatu wasalam. It just happened on its own because these were social norms that everyone adhered to, which is why I'm trying to point them out. This is what everyone kind of understood. So these are the different types of cross-gender relationships. You have your maharim, those who you have very little parameters with in terms of your relationship with them outside of obviously sexual intimacy. Emergency relationships which allow for that which would not be allowed in other situations just out of the fact that people are in need. It's a medical situation. You have blood relations, you have social acquaintances, you have professional relationships, classmate relationships, you have mentor-mentee with a power differential. These relationships have to be regulated and they have to stay within their parameters. You have to stick within the lane that you're in, to focus on what exactly here you're here to do. And then you have the spouses, which allows for, so what is the problem with all these relationships? What is the actual issue? What am I kind of dancing around here? So the problem is the F word, flirting, calm down. Right? It's flirting. Flirting is the problem. It's flirtatious relationships. The problem is when we allow for flirting. Flirting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the ladies, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ وَقُلْنَ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. الخضوع بالقول in Arabic is what flirting is in English. الخضوع بالقول is when you speak to someone, you are not direct about what you want. You are implying it in how you're talking, your body language, your eye language, the way you're doing things. It's suggestive, but not really. it's kind of making someone ask questions, but they're not sure. See, that piece is what flirtation is, right? Flirting is the problem within relationships, especially the relationships that I've been defining for you, like social acquaintances or blood relations or professional relations. These, when flirting enters this, and the thing is, I can't measurably point it out for you, but the human being knows when they are flirting or when they are being flirted with. We have a very heightened degree of sensitivity. Like we know immediately when that was not necessary. Right? When that reaction was not really the professional reaction to this situation, where this person is suggesting, and it keeps you what? It keeps you guessing the whole time, and it opens the door. It opens the door for slowly shaitan to come into this relationship and start playing around. Islam is very big on directness. If you saw someone and you like the person that you saw, if you are direct about it, it doesn't work. But I'm saying if you're direct about it, like if you go up to them and say, I'm interested in halal, I want to talk to you about this, and you guys sit down and talk about what you hope to do in your lives, where you are and where you're going. This is fine Islamically because it's very direct, it's clear. There's no room for ambiguity, right? There's no room for the ladies hate this, they don't like it. But if it were to work, I mean, if you did it and they were like, sure, I'll talk to you, then this is totally acceptable because this is actually clear. Islam, as long as it's clear, as long as it's qawlan ma'rufa. What's qawlan ma'rufa? I'll help you with understanding this. Qawl ma'ruf, this is how I define it, is that if anyone heard you saying it, you wouldn't be embarrassed. Like, you wouldn't find it difficult. You're like, oh yeah, if someone recorded you, you're like, yeah, that's fine. No problem. If you're like, no, please delete that, then that's not qawl ma'ruf. Then what you did, that you flirted, or you behaved in a way inappropriately, and you just don't want people to know about it. Qawl ma'ruf is like something that, I don't care who hears this, this is me being very appropriate, and I'm proper, and I'm direct, and I'm not hiding anything. Islam likes that clarity, as long as it's clear, which is why we have a problem with dating. Because what is dating, really? Like, what is it? So what is the parameters of dating? What's going to happen today? Who exactly are you to me, and who am I to you? And what's going to happen? Anything can happen. That's the whole point, it's ambiguous. We have no idea what's going to happen, which makes it exciting, because no one knows, so anything can go on. And that just keeps that energy flowing, but it's the problem. Because in Islam, no, define what's happening here. What we're sitting on the table, we're talking. What are we talking about? There are parameters. We are colleagues, so we'll stick to that. It doesn't mean that you can't be kind and decent and pleasant. No. But flirting is a human behavior. الخضوع بالقول is something that both men and women are very sensitive to, and they know when it's happening, and they know when they're doing it. And it's not very difficult for you when it occurs to withdraw. You withdraw twice from someone flirting with you. They won't flirt with you anymore. But you also have to be aware of yourself when you're being a little bit flirtatious yourself. Right? When you're trying to be that, when you're trying to get something out of this, that's a little bit different. It doesn't have to be that your eyesight is on وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ فَاحِشَةٌ or marriage, but you're just looking for a different type of validation from the other person. You're searching for something for yourself, a way to feel recognized or noticed or admired or liked. Right? This is what we look for in life. We want to feel that. Right? So feel that from your spouse. That's why you have a spouse. You go feel that from them. You don't want to feel that from them, then we have a problem. Then we have to talk about why is that the case. You feel validated from your mahram, the people around you. Why do you need this from outside of the unit? This is the whole point of it. The point of having a spouse is that this is the person you try to impress. You try to flirt with. Flirting is not a haram thing to do. It's just you're doing it with the wrong group. And some people normalize this behavior, and they do it all the time, and they do it with everyone, and they are confusing individuals. They're confusing human beings, and they do. They cause a lot of confusion in community. I see it because I'm sitting on the people are on the stage, and I'm sitting with popcorn in the stands watching, because you see how people are behaving, and then you see what the consequences of these behaviors are. You see how people understand certain behaviors, how they read it, and how it can be very problematic for men and I sometimes have to actually intervene, call someone else. This isn't working. You're stirring a lot of interest in yourself. There's people, once an individual is asked about by more than 2 or 3 people, I know that this person has a problem in how they present themselves to others. And they need to kind of work on correcting it. Correcting how they present themselves, how they speak to other people. They are sending messages that the other group of people are misunderstanding, and they're thinking that this is what a certain message is being conveyed when the message is not being conveyed, or maybe it is. Some people enjoy. Some people enjoy sending confusing messages, getting other people to like them and crave them and want them. They enjoy being craved by multiple individuals on that level. It's a problem. It's an illness. It's a heart illness. It's a problem that exists on the inside. You shouldn't crave that, and that should not be the case here. So, really, what I want you to watch out for is this word and what it means to you. And the more professional you are, the less likely you're going to fall into haram. Because what's the end game here with flirtation? The end game is either marriage or haram, right? If it's haram, well, why? Why would you do this? Why would you allow yourself? Think about that this is going to lead me to zina, something that I don't want on my track record. Like, I don't want to have this on my permanent record. I don't want to do this. I don't want to fall into it. I don't know how to deal with it if I do. So why start? And if the end game is marriage, then might as well just do it right from the beginning. Why go through the window? Come through the door. Just knock on the door. Make it much more. You're respected more. She feels more respected. You feel more respected. The family feels more respected. Everyone's happier when you knock on the door and come through the proper routes for this. When you jump through the window a couple of times, they're less likely. They don't respect you anymore. They know that you're not a straight shooter. You're not someone who's who values their integrity. So it's an important topic to think about. So let's talk about some basic rules. These are basic rules that Islam has established. Number one, holistic social system. Islam is not, when it's talking about gender relationships, the focus is not just on a specific behavior, doing it or not doing it, or a specific dress code. It's talking about a holistic social system. If we function in a certain way, all of us, then we will be able to maintain the ethicality of our societies. And when we all behave this way, when we are all professional with one another, when we avoid flirtatious relationships within our community, when we respect the boundaries of others, when we dress in a certain way and look a certain way and behave a certain way, then we're able to function in a proper manner. Our societies flourish. Like everyone's expected to lower their gaze. Everyone's expected to not think in certain ways about the other gender. Everyone is
self-value. No matter what I tell you in tazkiyah, for example, about your self-value, if this occurs to you, this is going to be a problem. You're going to need help. You're going to need help for a certain amount of time before you're able to actually get over it. Appropriate dress code. A part of this system, one of the basic rules is that we have to adhere to a dress code. As Muslim men, we have to dress in a way where we're not revealing our shape and our figures and our forms and our skin. And women do the same thing, with more emphasis, obviously, on how women adhere to that. Meaning it's not the same, no, it's not exactly the same. It's a little bit different. Women have to do more of it. Well, with more obligation within Islam, there's more reward. The more difficult the regulation or the ruling or the law is for you, the more ajr and reward you get for adhering to it. But the reason that this is the case, the reason that women adhere to a more strict law or ruling in terms of their dress code, is because of the nature of men and women. Islam respects the nature of how men and women function. Men are much more visibly drawn and oriented. It's just how men are. Now, at the end of this course, at the end of this lecture today, I'll point that out for you specifically, because Islam respects human nature. We're living now in a time where the narrative does not seem to acknowledge human nature. It does not recognize that we are a little bit different, men and women are a little bit different in terms of how they build attraction, what they are attracted to, what stimulates them, what affects them, and in what degrees of variation does that occur. When Islam asked us to adhere to a certain dress code, and women adhere to a dress code where there's a hijab and they're covering their skin and not exposing it, the reason is it's multifocal. It's not just one reason. It's not just the fact that men are attracted to the visible. It's also attached to the fact that when women want to enjoy their spouses in the future, when we want to, as a society, make sure that married couples continue to find each other attractive and continue to enjoy each other sexually, there has to be less exposure of what's outside of what's being exposed inside. If what's being exposed outside is similar to what's being exposed inside, or the difference is very subtle, then it's hard, the mammalian brain can't really differentiate anymore. And this becomes less valuable. I remember this story that my mom told me once. That we have this, a great uncle and great aunt of mine. When I say great, as in they were very old. They were old when I was a kid, and they passed away only a few years ago. And she told me the story, they were both well into their 70s. And she was in the house, in their house, and they was trying to figure out where the bathroom is. So she opened the door, and it was not the bathroom door. It was their bedroom. Then she was like, what is this? This is not a bedroom. This looks like a brothel. Like the bedroom was extremely well put together, very colorful. It smelled like it was very well taken care of. This bedroom of two people in their 70s was a door that no one would open in the house, and it was an environment that was set up that was very, very comfortable for the people who were going to be in it. And she was just very taken back by this, meaning knowing these two people, knowing how they are in general life. They're both hardworking farmers. Amti Allah yarhamha, if you slapped me over the face, I would have a concussion for a couple of weeks easily. So you wouldn't think that this person actually valued that part of their lives, but they did, and this was the norm. When now our married people's bedrooms are like pigsties, like they look horrible, and they're not well taken care of. There's no intimacy. There's nothing that suggests that this is an intimate part of the house, when really that is required for this relationship to be. For this relationship to flourish, for this relationship to be sustainable, that piece has to be taken care of, right? And that comes from the same concept that we have a dress code because we don't have this access to one another on the outside. When women cover themselves, what they are doing really in reality is that they're forcing men to listen to what they have to say, not to stare at their figure. If you allow a man to do so, a man will not listen to a word. He'll just look, he'll just stare. He'll just, if you make it optional, even those who don't want to do that, even men who don't have that tendency, if you make it more difficult, to put it that way. You make it more hard for them to actually value the merit of what's being taught. So when women cover up and they're not exposing their figure or their form, they are demanding a certain degree of respect. They're demanding from the person in front of them a certain degree of respect, and they are forcing the person in front of them to actually listen to the merit of what they are saying, to value their intellect, to value who they are. We see this all the time. When Hollywood stars are being interviewed, they ask the men questions that have depth to them. And then they ask the women what her diet was before this, and what size this she wears. And it's very offensive and it's rude, but it's because this society has now been rigged in that, it has been programmed that way, to only see value if they are young and they look a certain way. When that is absolutely horrible. Think about this. This is an absolutely horrible thing for it to exist. The last piece on dress code that I want to point out to you here is that when you dress, you have to dress with an intention, right? You have to dress with an intention. So if I want to be respected, I dress respectfully, right? I'll dress respectfully if I want people to respect me. So when someone says that you're dressing, and they use the word sexy, so what does that person want? I pose the question here. If I dress respectfully to be respected, when I'm dressing in a sexy way, then what am I hoping for? Am I actually hoping that people walk around, look at me, and hope or wish they could have intimacy? That's what I'm walking around with. I'm walking around hoping that everyone who sees me wishes that they could be intimate with me. This is what we're hoping for. This is a sick way of thinking that has been normalized now in most of the world. That we dress in a way where the goal is to be attractive to people. Why? You want people, you're trying to attract people to? What are you attracting them to? And what are you hoping that you gain from this? But then it comes to the same problem that we've been talking about, that ambiguity. That it's unclear. It's a game, it's play, it's flirtation. Flirtation is dangerous. Flirtation is not a benign behavior, right? It's not a benign behavior that goes on no, you do this long enough and people will get hurt. People will be harmed. People will harm one another. Something wrong will go. We're not of the narrative that a woman who gets raped, she wasn't dressed. No. Someone who raped her should be buried under the prison, honestly. But there's no justification for someone mistreating a lady or performing any form of taharrush, of harassment of another person, regardless of how I don't care, it doesn't matter. But I'm talking about the dress code that is going to fit within the needs and the requirements of a society. We're talking about a society here that wants to function. Well, in order for it to function, we have to have some parameters. And one of these parameters is the dress code that we're going to implement upon ourselves, helping everyone within the society to function better, helping everyone it's helping us along, making it easier for us to make the right choice. Islam is about that. Islam is always setting things up to allow you to make the better choice, to lessen the amount of distraction and temptation. And the less there is, that's why zakah is there. You give the poor so that they're less likely to steal. Everything in Islam, all the rulings of Islam are oriented in a way to lessen and decrease the amount of difficulty and challenges that people have towards making the right choice. You already have enough on the inside. Your nafs is already pushing back at you as it is. You don't need difficulty on the outside as well, which is why young Muslim men and women who live in the West are admirable, honestly, as they hold on to their ethics and hold on to their values and hold on to their Islamic creed, because it's not easy. You're dealing with temptation on the inside, but you're also facing it on the outside at all times. So it's actually quite admirable. Parameters on relationship, which we talked about. Another part of the basic rules is there's going to be parameters in every relationship. What are we here? Are we colleagues? We're going to talk about work. We're blood related. We're going to talk about that. We're social acquaintances. We're going to talk about our neighborhood. We're going to talk about things that are related to why we have a relationship to begin with. You're my patient. We're going to talk about your disease. We're going to, on and on, depending on what there have to be parameters. Once you have an ill-defined relationship, once we don't know what this is, you open. We're going out with a group of friends, men and women. Yeah, where? Matam. To do what? Just to eat. You can't eat at home. The food here is not edible. So what's the point of doing this? Well, we're friends. What does that mean? So what exactly is she to you? Well, a friend. What is that? Describe that to me. Is she a marriage interest? Have you made that clear? So everyone who does this, by the way, are full of it, all of them. Like when they ask me the question, I ask 3 questions and then they stop, they leave. Because everyone knows what they're doing. People know everyone knows that within this friend group, there's someone they like, and they're waiting for them to make a move, or waiting to see if maybe they can get a little bit out of this, right? So it's a game, and it's maneuvering, and it's playing, and this is not healthy. It's not healthy for people. It's not helpful at all. This actually causes a lot of problems, because you're waiting for one person to make a move, and there's another person waiting for you to make a move, and then that person, another person make a move, and then there's this triangle of garbage that is occurring, and people are getting very upset and very frustrated and getting tired, and they're not getting what they want, and they're flirting with one another, and they're feeling bad when the other person's flirting with another person and not with them, and and then it just ends up in a whole mess. Or someone's completely left out. They're sitting there and no one's interested in them, right? There's always that one person who no one's interested in them, and they're interested in everyone. And this is not fair to them. None of this is fair. It's not nice, it's not kind, it's very rude, it's difficult, and it's disrespectful, and it's harmful. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. When there's some degree of segregation within friend groups, it's healthier for everyone. And then when there's going to be a relationship between, it's either well-defined, or if it's marriage, then it happens appropriately. Wallahi, back in like 1,000 years ago, or 500 years ago, I don't have to go back that far. Honestly, maybe even less. I've never been able to put like an exact number on it. But I know that maybe the time of my great-grandfather being alive, there was no such thing as a lady not having suitors throughout her prime years, or not getting married. If she didn't get married, she didn't want to get married. Like she was just swatting them all away. She didn't care for this marriage, and that's fine. Some people don't care for intimacy. They're not looking for it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But human beings like, I have no interest in this. I don't want intimacy. I'm not interested in doing this. That's not a problem whatsoever. But it didn't exist. It wasn't even. It didn't exist as well as a young man not being able to find marriage either. We're living now in societies where people are in their late 20s, early 30s, mid-30s, late 30s, and they still can't find marriage. And this, to me, tells me that there's a problem within the system. There's a systematic problem in how we are seeing one another and how we are dealing with this issue. And a part of it is that the parameters of relationships aren't clear, and the societal holistic system is not being adhered to. Preserving integrity of families and lineage. Another thing is that one of the goals here is that we preserve the integrity of families. So we make sure that things happen the proper way. You knock on the door. My job as a father is to vouch for people and to also read you. You come and knock on my door asking for my daughter. I'm gonna see what you're about. I'm going to test you and see, are you worthy of being a part of my family, of taking the most valuable thing that I have in my life, which is my daughter. Are you worthy of, are you going to treat her well? Are you someone who's patient? Are you kind? Are you perseverant? Are you generous? What type of person are you? There used to be these habits back in Syria that you would always, whenever the Aris knocked on the door and came, you would offend them. You would say something, like you would say something rude, just to see how they respond. Just to see when they get mad or offended, how do they, right? Because you can't hide that piece. Like I can come with a nice clean cut and a suit and everything and a smile and roses and stuff and sit there. But then if you need to figure out who I am, that mask is easy. Anyone can put that up. So they would say something, like they would say something bad about their parents or their lineage or their background or their profession. Just something to offend them, to see what they would do. And then if the person got red in the face or got upset or got comfortable, oh, so this person has a temper. So they have a temper. So you learn something about them. You also learn if they are, they have thick skin and they don't get bothered by stuff like that, and they let it go and they're open. It's learning about people because we're trying to preserve these families. There's no hope for divorce to occur. For divorce to occur is horrible. It's not the goal. The goal is for these two people to actually build a unit together, to have children and to raise their children, to love their children, to love one another, and to care for one another. So you have to make sure that they're going to actually do that. It's not by making marriage difficult. It's just making sure that there's compatibility. Instead of going and dating multiple people and sleeping with them throughout the time, which is ruining your psyche and ruining your ability to actually appreciate others as you go along, as you move along with your life, you do it in a way where you allow people who love you and the other person to help you out a little bit. This idea that, oh, I don't want anyone to help me is very arrogant from a young person. And it comes from a lack of wisdom and experience. What do you know about long-term relationships when you are 20? What do you know about what long-term relationship have you been in your life, aside from your mother? Aside from your mother, you don't even have a long-term relationship with your father yet at 20. You maybe saw him 15 times in the last 20 years and maybe spoke to him 3 times. You don't even have a long-term relationship with him to have one to know what you would be looking for in a spouse. So when a young man tells me, I don't want my parents to help me, like, I hope you never get married then. Because if you don't want your parents to help you, then who is going to help you? What, your divine wisdom is going to be able to figure out the person who's right for you? Based on what? What toolkit do you have? What skill set have you built that allows you to be able to do that? I'm not saying that marriages need to be arranged at all. That's not a part of Islam ever. It never was. But you allow them to at least recommend people for you. You allow them to look at the person you're interested in and tell you that's not going to work or that's going to work. This is natural. Who else are you going to go to if not to your parents? Who loves you more? Who knows you more than them? It's a very weird thing. Same thing for sisters. The job of your father is to tease out who's coming to the house. His job is to filter. Nope, that person is not gonna, no. But I like him, I don't care, it doesn't matter. I know men. You don't men. Women don't know men. And men don't know women. It's just the reality of it, which is why you need people involved. You think she's gonna be a good fit for you because, you know, she flirted with you a few times, she has a nice smile. That's it, khalas, you're sold. Most men, that's it, they don't really, it's a very simple mind. Yeah, okay, that's it, I'm gonna marry her, have kids with her, she's gonna be my wife. Yeah. Then parents come in and say, no, there's something here that needs to be, it's not a good fit. It's not about that she's less or you're less, or no, this is an issue of compatibility, meaning you're not gonna make her happy, she's not gonna make you happy. You guys aren't gonna fit for, you know, for the long run, and that's really what we're in for. When a guy knocks on the door, let your father take a look at him. Let him tell you, because he knows, he's walking in, again, the lady looks at him, well, he's tall, he's not fat, he's not bald, this is the criteria that she's using, he's wealthy. Oh, khalas, the man looks at it and he sees something else. He knows that as a woman in the house, you're a bit more vulnerable in the home. With children, you're even more vulnerable. He has to know that this is an actual man, not a male. There's a lot of males. You need a man, someone who's going to actually take care of you. Put your well-being ahead of his. He will sacrifice all his time to make sure he takes care of you. That is, he has to vouch him out. He has to make sure that that's the case. So you have to let your father do this. You have to let them do their job for you, or else, and every time, well, I can't say every time because that will be a lie, but almost every time I've seen it, where they went against what they're not happy. A couple of years into it, they come back and they're miserable, but now they have 2 kids. And ending this is a pain, and they end it, and who pays for it? It's these 2 little gremlins that were brought to the world in a broken home, where their grandparents don't even like them because their grandparents don't like the other one. You see, in order for your parents to like your children, they have to kind of at least accept your spouse. If they don't like your spouse at all, it's hard, and you'll feel it. Kids feel it. Kids feel it when their grandparents don't favor them, for example, when there are others around. So be careful this is why this is an important thing, preserving the integrity of families. So let's talk about some guiding principles. I'll just go through them. Sorry, this took longer than I thought it was going to take. We'll go through some guiding principles, and then we'll, can someone just press it for me? I'll read some statements for you to help kind of, yep. Does it move? Will it work? Okay, perfect. So clearly defined relationships will be safe as long as both adhere to proper etiquette. When you have a clearly defined relationship, you know exactly why you're talking to this person, you adhere to proper etiquette, you're not flirting, then this is a safe relationship. You can have a relationship. I work with women all the time. All of my nurses are ladies within this center. A lot of the volunteers are women. We have a healthy, long-term relationships that have been going on for years and years and years. Why? Because we know exactly why we're working together. We know exactly what we're talking about, and we have the proper etiquette as we do it. So there's safety. They're safe in my presence, and I'm safe in their presence, and we're not risking anything as we go along. Both genders are expected to lower their gaze, dress appropriately, and act respectfully. Both genders. Both genders, not just the ladies, have to dress a certain way and lower their gaze. Men have to do that too. Men have to do that. Men were given the command first in the Quran, by the way. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم ذَلِكَ أَزْكَىٰ لَهُمْ. And then the ladies were talked to. So then, ladies actually are more likely to do that anyways. It's men that are less likely to do that. So men are told to do this first. You have to dress appropriately. You have to lower your gaze. You have to act respectfully with people around you. This is not something that's not a one-way road, it's a two-way road. The concept of friends without clear parameters always ends up disastrous. It always ends up disastrous. It's almost, it's inevitable. It's inevitable when you use the word friends and there's no clear parameter for that, there's no definition for that. This is how all drama on TV exists. If you removed the concept of friends between men and women on TV, like we would have like 85% less shows to watch. All the interesting thing on TV is like, oh, a friend, oh, and then they had an affair, and oh, and they ruined soap opera. Now you have something to watch. Oh my God, she did this, oh, he did that. Well, why did this happen to begin with? Well, because there was an ill-defined relationship at the beginning. Like I'm always watching these things, like, oh, stop right there. All right, that's where this began. Let's intervene right now. Let's intervene in the show right now. Maybe you guys don't do this with one another, and then you'll never have a problem. Like none of this would happen. You wouldn't ruin the family. The country would not be bombed, and people would not meet their apocalypse. Like if you just stop doing this one mistake, just don't do this mistake. Subhanallah. Being kind and pleasant and caring is not considered being flirtatious. Though there is a thin line here, but it's not considered. You walk into the morning, I walk in, the nurses are like, how are you doing? How are things going? How is your family? How was your weekend? This is normal. This is being pleasant. This is being kind. This is not flirtatious. You know when you're being flirtatious, and you know when you're being flirted with. You know it. You know it. You don't need me to tell you about this. Don't come and ask me questions. I don't know. You know it's a heightened sensitivity that we all have. and we know when we're using it as well. So we just remove that, and then you can be very pleasant and very kind and very open, very caring to the people that are around you. Sometimes you have to be, as a Muslim, you're not saying, well, I don't, but she's crying, I don't know, what's wrong? Well, khair inshallah, what's going on? You show some degree of empathy with the person beside you. This is just being caring, but there is a thin, I'm telling you, there's a thin line, but there is difference. And Islam, of course you're going to be caring. The Prophet ﷺ had discussions with ladies all the time. He counseled them all the time, ﷺ, but it was very, very professional. Right? There was never a crossing of lines in any of these situations. He would, when you watch his life, ﷺ, you'll see what I mean. People were comfortable around him. He was comfortable around other people because he carried a certain ethic in how he dealt with others and made everyone feel very comfortable, and they felt safe, and they also behaved that way as well. Is it going to work? Perfect. So private texting is a virtual seclusion. When we talk about khalwa, it's a virtual khalwa. When you're texting someone privately, this is a virtual khalwa. I don't know what the ruling on that is yet, because we have not yet, as scholars, figured out exactly what, and the scholars, have not really figured out what what we're going to call this. Because khalwa, where you're sitting in confinement with another lady who is not a mahram, and there's no, and it's not a patient-physician relationship, or it's not a counseling relationship, then this is where we run the risk. You can say, well, no, I'm safe. No, there's no such thing. You're human. Are you not human? If you're human, then you're not going to be safe, and neither is she. So that's why we have to keep doors open, windows, transparent windows, there's a chaperone there, just for everyone's safety. But when we're texting now, this is where I think 95, in my experience over the last 10 years, 95% of problems that are coming from this. It's texting. Why? Because it's easier. Everything online is easier to do. The worst of you can come out online. You can do stuff online or virtually that you would not do in person. Because when I have to stare you in the face and say this or do this, it's much more embarrassing. It's much more shameful. So I'm more likely to regulate my words and my emotions. But when it's virtual, well, the person's not there to look at you. People post the meanest things in the world online. Why? Because you don't have the other person's face in front of you to see how they're going to respond. You're not going see when a person's face crumps up and gets upset, you're like, I don't like that. I'm not going to say that. I don't want to see that. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But when you're sitting behind a screen, so people are more likely to cross the boundaries of haya, cross the boundaries of chastity and appropriateness and professionalism when they're texting. So be very careful. It should be avoided as much as possible and dealt with carefully, especially amongst the young and single. Young and single have to be very careful. Maybe as you grow up, maybe when you build a professional relationship with someone, you've been working with them for a long time. I work with physicians all the time. We text back and forth. It's very, very, what are we texting about? We're texting about work. We're texting about patients. We're texting about coverage, call schedules. It's very simple. But when you're young and single, be careful. I encourage people to have, when people are collaborating at a young age, for there to be group chats. And then you talk to the person through the group chat. Why? Because it's apparent, everyone can see it. You're less likely to say something that's wrong because everyone can see what you wrote, so you're not going to qawlan ma'rufan because so again, people tell me, I text, I never make, it's fine, it's not, okay, show me your texts. And then they're like, no, I can't. Show me any part. No, why can't I show you your text? Why can't I see this conversation? That is totally fine. There's no problem with it, and I'm being too restrict. Show me the text the text messages that you've been sharing with this person. They have a heart attack. They run into the room and they delete everything. Why? Because they're scared that I'm a hacker and can actually get the information. But the reason being is that they know that they said here was not appropriate. They know that, which is why we suggest that maybe a group. That's why for us a lot of the communication that we have, either through email or through group texting, so that everyone is there and it's not and it's for safety. It's for protection of everyone involved. Preventing people from developing halal relationships will most certainly lead them to developing haram relationships, for sure. This is on us as a community. It's not on you as an individual, a single individual who's looking for marriage. It's not your problem or your fault. It will be later on when you're in your 40s, and you have your children, when you're like, oh, mahar should be rakhis. Mahar should be very easy, except when it's your daughter. Then it has to be astronomical because she's way more. So it's understanding how the system is going to work, understanding what criteria we're looking for when we're inviting people for marriage, or we're allowing them into our homes for marriage, what exactly we're looking for, what we're expecting from young men at a certain age. It has to be realistic, it has to be appropriate. Our standards for marriage for our children cannot be just based on personal preferences as parents, but it has to be based on compatibility. My job is to look for compatibility, not for preferences. No, I want my kinnati or I want my sihr to be from a specific part of the world. No, that's not really what you're asked to do. You're looking for compatibility. You're making sure that the cultural differences are not severe to the point where the person cannot put up with their spouse, but you're not allowed to kind of become that specific, and not, especially not on the, at the expense of someone who's wanting to get married. Because you're postponing year after year after year with no marriage and no intimacy. What do you think they're doing for 15 years? Has anyone asked this question? What is a single person doing for 15 years or 20 years without marriage? Oh, we're not going to ask that question. We're going to draw a blind eye to that and just let them. No, you have to understand that people can't function that long. They need, this is a requirement. It's something the human being craves. They crave love and to be loved and to be intimate, and they have the right to pursue that. A certain degree of jealousy is healthy and essential for a successful spouse relationship. Not every jealousy, not all jealousy is wrong. Don't get upset if you have a spouse that's a little bit jealous and doesn't like certain things. No, actually, if they're not jealous at all about you, that means they don't really like you that much. And they don't get, no, it really is a problem. So a certain degree of jealousy is healthy. Other degrees, it can get to the point where it's pathological and it requires like intervention. It requires a psychologist or a family therapist to get involved, or a spouse therapist to get involved. But there's a certain degree of it that is actually quite healthy. And adding to that, feelings of spouses must be respected and taken into consideration regarding cross-gender relationships. Like if there's a lady that I'm working with and my wife doesn't like it, then I have to take that into consideration. Like I have to care for that. I can't say, no, we're fine. No, if she feels something's wrong, she's probably right, by the way. Just like when I feel something's wrong, I'm probably right. When I'm like, I don't like Fulan, maybe don't talk to him as much. I'm probably right. Why? Because we know our own species. Like we know. I know guys, and guys know me, so it's harder to lie. But it's not the same when it's dealing with someone else, just like ladies know ladies. So when your spouse feels something and they're upset, take that into consideration. Respect their feelings. It's not appropriate for you to disrespect their feelings. Whether it's your wife or it's your husband, you have to respect their feelings on what they sense is going on, and take that into consideration. This is the final slide of the whole course, or this whole series. Islam recognizes human nature, understanding the needs of the human being, both male and female. All the laws and rulings regarding cross-gender relationships are guided by Islam's recognition of the different needs of each gender, the nature of any given setting, and the variety of age groups involved. So Islam, when it has these rulings, it has, for example, a lady who's وَالْقَوَاعِدُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ اللَّاتِي لَا يَرْجُونَ نِكَاحًا فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِنَّ جُنَاحٌ أَن يَضَعْنَ ثِيَابَهُنَّ غَيْرَ مُتَبَرِّجَاتٍ بِزِينَةٍ. So ladies who are elderly, who are not interested in marriage anymore, they don't have to wear hijab. They can walk out without hijab. Why? Because that part of their life is over. They're no longer at risk for these things. They're no longer looking for it. So they can do it. On the other hand, young and single, they have to adhere to certain stuff. And I think that's just an example of how Islam recognizes human nature, recognizes our needs, where our challenges are, and then regulates things for us in a way that is healthy. And that's what I want to share with you on this topic. This was obvious to the Sahaba. They didn't struggle with any of this. They didn't have any need to ask a million questions on what's okay and what's not okay. They didn't have, because they knew when they were crossing a line and when they weren't, and they didn't. They were very direct with what they wanted. They didn't get into haram. At least those of them who were practicing Islam did not. A final piece of advice for you. You have to identify yourself, a man or woman, whether you are on the market or not. All right? Meaning, are you ready for marriage? Like, is this something that you are capable of doing? And it's more a problem for boys and the shabab than it is for the ladies. The ladies are more prepared for marriage earlier on, and they're actually capable of running a household and caring for a family way before, like a decade before a guy is. So for the shabab, the question is, are you on the market? If I were to call your bluff, I saw you looking at someone and خضوع بالقول بالفlirting, and I called your bluff. Let's go ask for her hand and get you married. Are you ready? Like, are you actually ready for this? Are you ready psychologically and financially and socially and spiritually and professionally and academically? Are you ready for this? And you're like, no, I'm not ready. Then what are you doing? Then why are you making it seem as if you are up for business and that you're not. You're not on the market, so you actually have to be even extra careful. Like if you're ready to get married, a certain degree of, I'm not saying flirtation, but a certain degree of availability can be expressed. You can show that I'm interested. That's fine, because that allows at least for some degree of interest to go back and forth. But when you're not on the market, you can't get married. Your parents told you absolutely not. You're broke. You're broke. You have no money. You have no job. Right now you're still studying. You have nothing at all. What are you doing? Why are you tying this lady up? Why are you? She's ready for marriage. She's waiting for a man to knock on her door and ask for her hand. What are you doing? You're not ready for any of this. Oh, she'll just wait for 3-4 years. 3-4 years? Why would she do that? Why would she do that? What are you, Prince Charming? Why? Why would she do this? It's not fair to her. It's not fair to you either, honestly. So when you're not on the market, you don't get involved at all. You don't make yourself available. You're extra professional because you don't want to open that door for yourself. When you're on the market, that's fine. You can be a little, and you can get other people to look for you as well. And there's a problem that I see with the younger grade. I'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanakallah bihamdik, shalla la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for attending. I hope you found this was beneficial and helpful. Forgive me for anything that I said here that was inappropriate or disrespectful or wrong. That's from me. Anything that was good in this course was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah alone subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lahul hamd. We praise Him and we thank Him for allowing us to talk about these during the blessed days of Ramadan. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us benefit through the knowledge that was shared here today and allow me to correct the mistakes I made. Please take a moment and scan the QR code. Offer any suggestions. If you're just going to say nice things, don't scan it. Oh, it's not. Yeah, yeah. If you have comments or suggestions or feedback or critique or questions, please put it there. If you're going to say it was nice, don't do it. I'm not going to read it. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.